Victims across the country. Together for victims across the country. For Danny Ray Thomas, an unarmed black man shot by a sheriff's deputy in Houston. For Zeke Upshaw, an NBA player for the Detroit Pistons G League, who died after his heart stopped in the middle of a game, and no one thought to check his heart, though he suffered from together for victims across the country. For Danny Ray Thomas, an unarmed black man shot by a sheriff's deputy in Houston. For Zeke Upshaw, an NBA player for the Detroit Pistons G League, who died after his heart stopped in the middle of a game, and no one thought to check his heart, though he suffered from a heart defect that often affects many world-class African-American athletes. For countless black customers of major banks who experience the phenomena known as banking while black. Unable to cash checks, unable to make withdrawals, unable to obtain home mortgages, though qualified, and often for simply going in the bank to try to conduct business, wrongly accused of a crime just for banking while black. Ben Crump has been called the black man's attorney general, but I know him to be every man's attorney general. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian. He also proudly stands with our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. He currently represents a gay black woman found hanging from a tree in Massachusetts this year, a victim of hate and fear. I've also seen another side of Ben Crump. I've seen him through the eyes of his mom, Helen Crump.
Yes.
Mama, as he called her last night on the phone to wake her up. Catherine and I sat with her at an event last year in Los Angeles where Ben was being honored. In return, I have set Ben next to my mom, Mama.
Yeah.
I listened and learned as Helen's eyes shined with a mother's love and she told of their life growing up in a small town in Lumberton, North Carolina, the deep, deep South. A strong and quiet woman who raised a strong and loud son. A son filled with his mother's love and his mother's deep and real Christian faith and his own beautiful, unique voice. Ben has his mother's love of justice and love of mission. He has seen, felt, and fought the cruelty of systemic racism, and he knows it has as its genesis fear.
Amen.
He knows to defeat it, you must always confront it. And as we all know, he has stood with and next to the families of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake, and tomorrow he'll get on a plane and go to Houston, Texas, where he's going to travel to Baytown and be with the family of Pamela Turner, an unarmed black woman laying down on the pavement when she was shot and killed by a police officer. Ben believes that you cannot be silent, and there is no silence in this man. You know, all of us don't have to go far from this room to use our voice to draw from Ben's example of courage and sense of social justice. Stand up and speak out against the new punitive and restrictive voting bill about to pass in Austin, directly designed and intended to make it more difficult for all Texans to participate in the right to vote. Or we just read sitting there, Ben and I, that the GOP just passed a law where teachers are not allowed to speak of the historic systemic racism in Texas in public classrooms. Every day of silence increases the power of injustice, and injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Amen.
Ben follows the creed of Dr. King, who said, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Every time I hear Ben talk, feel his passion, his power, and his belief, I know he is this generation's answer to Dr. King's message. It is my great honor to introduce to you my friend, Ben Crump.
Thank you very much to my dear friend and law partner, Bob Hilliard, who I'll talk about in just a moment. But first, I want to thank President Jeff Merriman. Your leadership has been inspiring to say that even though we're still dealing with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, we're making progress. And so I thank you and your executive leaders of the Corpus Christi Bar Association. I thank the planners who didn't give up on us after last year when we could not come together. And I thank your city leadership who have just been so accommodating to me and my law partners, Chris O'Neill and my good friend Fernandez Anderson. It's their first time coming to Corpus. See, I've been in Corpus before. I know about you. So, President Merriman, thank you for the kind words that you said about me as well. Before I begin my conversation with you all, I would be remiss if I did not thank my hosts who did not think it robbery for us to not just come to Corpus and stay in a hotel, but literally insisted that we stay at their beautiful home, and that is Bob and Catherine Hill. Yes. That you've been asked for. And I tell you, Catherine Hilliard, as you all know, is not only brilliant and beautiful, but I found out, and I don't know why I'm surprised, because of course she can do it all, but she cooked every meal for Chris Fernandez and I, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I'm a finicky eating man. Yeah. And I gotta tell you how I have empirical evidence that she can cook. That's just got thrown out. And Bob did one lucky enough job on Martinez. He got Catherine who cooks for him every day. I don't know how to tell my wife that. And certainly, to Bob Hilliard, a man who has inspired me, not just as an attorney, but as a human being, Matt. You know, Bob, when we were doing the banking discrimination cases, in these banking while black cases, banking while brown cases, the one thing that we discovered was that the banks, they wanted to try to have a quick settlement because they were embarrassed by their racist actions. But what they did not want to address, Lauren, is the crux of the matter. And the thing that made me proudest to be beside Bob, my brother from another mother, who, and I'm sure we have different life experiences, Miss Hilliard, but he understood the humanity of the injustice, that it is not enough just to have the bank throw a couple of pennies at us and say that it's okay. Let's move on. Let's sweep it under the rug. No, we have to deal with the problem of systematic racism and discrimination in banking in America. I mean, that's why they're including Dallas can attest to. When you talk about the art of the walkout, Jim, man, while I'm in Minneapolis, I'm virtual, they're there in New York, we negotiate this big settlement, and they offer bonds and money, and I think this is the Texas non-verbal language that you're going to do right by us. They make the offer for Fernandez, and Bob puts his hands in his pocket. And say, that's the message to the mediator in the bank. And you know what? You know what? Because Bob stood firm on his principles, we were able to get a landmark recovery for the clients who felt the humiliation of being discriminated against, not because they didn't have good credit scores, not because they didn't have assets and education and good jobs, but they were discriminated against, Mr. Miller, merely because the color of their skin. And we're not talking about in 1940 and 1950. We're talking about in 2019 and 2020. It's still happening today. And what Bob Hilliard did so dramatically was to say, we have to deal with the problem of denial of access to capital. Because if we don't deal with it, the chasm continues to get wider and wider and wider. And that's why I love Bob Hilliard, and that's why I'm proud to be his law partner. So congratulations, Corpus Christi, Lawyer of the Year. Because I am always reminded, Bob, as I began my conversation with you all, and as you see in my book, Open Season, The Legalized Genocide of Colored People, those who would deny racism exists and try to just look the other way or sweep it under the rug could possibly, indirectly, be its greatest supporters, because it leads to the current state of unchecked racism. And as history has taught us, unchecked racism leads to death of marginalized minorities in America. And so I want to start there. I know I only have about 15, 20 minutes, and I want to speak a lot from the heart, because I'm a trial lawyer. That's the only way I know how.
That's good.
And so, you know, if you ever go to trial for $40 million, you know, he expects us to speak from the heart and tell it as it is. And so, may it please this court. I understand my title is Advancing the Rule of Law Now. And I will put forth arguments why it matters now, why it matters and is critical now. Right now in America, we're seeing things happen that gives us the possibility at being a better America, a more just America, an America where Ahmaud Arbery, a young black man, gets to run free and not be lynched for jacking out black in 2020, Coretta. A more just America, a better America, where Breonna Taylor, a young black woman, gets to sleep in her house and not have the police execute an illegal and unjustified and unconstitutional no-knock warrant at 1 in the morning, where she is executed with 6 bullets while practically naked in the sanctity of our own home. We can have a better America, a more just America, where George Floyd gets an opportunity to take another breath and not be tortured to death by police keeping his knee on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. And a better America, a more just America, where all of our children get an opportunity to the American promise of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. That's what this is about. That's why we have to have the rule of law now, to make sure the Constitution applies to all of our children now, not tomorrow. Justice delayed is justice denied. And as I think about Allie, who is Bob and Catherine's brilliant daughter, and I think it's Parker, who is Attorney Burkett's daughter, who I met last night, who said, and then I was taken aback a little bit about it, Catherine. She said, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. I want to be a civil rights lawyer. And I was looking at this beautiful young little white girl with her glasses, and I said, no, you're going to be way better than me. But the fact that she wanted to be a civil rights lawyer, she wanted to be able to live in a better world. Our children want a better world. The only question really is, do we have the courage to give them one? That's really the only question. Do we have the courage to do it? You know, Ben Franklin said that democracy is like 2 wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. You know, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know how that vote gonna go. But John Martinez, Ben Franklin said, liberty is making sure that that lamb is well armed to protest that vote. So we have to make sure that our young lambs living in marginalized communities are well armed to vote, to protest the school to prison pipeline that will have them targeted in their crosshairs. We have to make sure that young lambs in marginalized communities are well armed, not with bullets and guns and violence, but are well armed with intellect and diplomacy and strategic aptitude to be able to challenge and protest this voter suppression, this denial of access to capital and banking discrimination, to be able to protest this educational inequities, to be able to protest this prison industrial complex that will use them to continue a new form of slavery. We have to make sure that our children are well armed to protest environmental racism that will see black communities and brown communities have a third of the lung capacity living in and around South Central Los Angeles than their white counterparts living 15, 20 miles away in Santa Monica, California, because they have made it legal in brown and black communities for factories and companies to have their toxic poisons dumped into the groundwater that our children drink in and bathe in and cook with, because they engage in the intellectual justification of discrimination that pretty much finds, Bob Hilliard, no matter what the situation is, poor people of color get the most of injustice and the least of justice. I don't care what the situation is. You can name it, and I can tell you how the result is by the people who continue to come up with technical justifications, intellectual justifications. And I am often reminded, Chris O'Neill, of what Dr. Martin Luther King said in his letter from the Birmingham jail. He said, just because they say it's legal, that don't make it right. He said that everything Hitler did to the Jews in Germany, they said was legal. But that didn't make it right. They said that slavery was legal. But that didn't make it right. They said that segregation was legal. But that didn't make it right. And they were trying to tell us what they did to Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky was legal. But I submit to you, Corpus Christi Bar Association, that does not make it right. That does not make it right. My grandmother taught me, and Bob told you about my mother, and I was so blessed to sit beside his beautiful mother, Miss Bobby Hilliard. Thank you for giving us Bob Hilliard. My mother and my grandmother primarily had the role in raising me. My grandmother, Minnie Carlisle, was an 8th grade education, still is the wisest person I have ever met on the face of this earth. And what she told me, Lauren, she said, baby, if you ever get a chance to speak truth to power, you do it. You do it, baby. And so as I look at this August assembly, man, I see a lot of power, a lot of influence, a lot of resources. And I am reminded of what Harry Belafonte, the great actor, told me and Jamie Foxx and Trayvon Martin's mother and father at the 2013 NAACP Image Awards. He told Jamie Foxx, influence means nothing if you don't use it when it matters most. If you don't do nothing that I say today, remember, your influence means nothing if you don't speak up for the little marginalized children in the world who don't have a voice. And if you don't help give them a voice, their pain will never be heard. And I think about what the Texas leadership did today to say that you can't teach about racism in the classroom in the state of Texas. What is the rationale behind that? If we are not going to use this influence to try to make the world better, if we're going to try to say, no, we want people just to continue to have to suffer through the racism and discrimination, how does that advance the cause of the highest ideals of America? This idea is about liberty and justice for all. And so we all have to collectively speak truth to power. We are the lawyers. We're the people who have to say the rule of law is not just for some, but it's for everybody. The Constitution belongs to George Floyd. The Constitution belongs to Ahmaud Arbery. The Constitution belongs to the young Hispanic person who was killed at the border, who Bob and Catherine so bravely represented, courageously represented before the United States Supreme Court. This is why the rule of law is important, because us lawyers have to remind society why it's important. That's our obligation. And so if they try to outlaw teaching it in the classroom, well, we have to teach it every chance we get in the courtroom. Amen? Every chance we get. And I will tell you, and I will try to finish up because my heart is heavy. I know what Bob and I are facing as we fight Bank of America and Wells Fargo and JP Chase Morgan and the largest financial institutions in America that say that you got to do right by little black people, little brown people, little red people. You can't discriminate against us just because you want to continue to put profit over people. No, this is America. We're better than that. That's right. We're better than that. President Durham, I took your motto for today, advancing the rule of law now. And in conclusion, the person who is my personal hero, I think said the most appropriate thing for the theme of today's luncheon. And my personal hero, if anybody who's ever followed anything I've ever done, is Justice Thurgood Marshall. Who came down to Texas and human sweat case. Some of you all may have learned about it at law school. University of Texas said black people could never go to college there. Thurgood came down and challenged that, and the lynch mob chased him all around. But despite that, he continued to find his way to the courthouse every morning, even though he had to sleep in a different bed every night, because they were trying to get him. And I think about what Justice Thurgood Marshall said on the 200-year celebration of the United States Constitution. And it wasn't very popular, but I absolutely tell you, it was completely true. And yet again, I am inspired to speak truth to power, just as Thurgood Marshall did in 1976. He said, Bob, that the basis of the American Constitution is simply this. He said that a black baby, or a brown baby, or a native baby, born to a minority mother, the most uneducated black mother, the most inarticulate black mother, the most impoverished black mother, has the same exact rights as a white baby. Born to a white mother, the most educated white mother, the most articulate white mother, the most affluent white mother, just by virtue of that baby drawing his first breath as an American. Now, Andrew Walker, Justice Marshall said, I know that is not the case in America beacon of hope and justice for all the world to marvel. So when we fight for the George Floyds of the world, when we fight for the Breonna Taylors of the world, when we fight for the Trayvon Martins of the world, and more importantly, when we fight for the unknown George Floyds of the world, when we fight for whom my grandmother often referred back to the Bible, the least of these. What we are really doing, brothers and sisters, are helping America live up to its highest ideals. What we are really doing is helping America live up to its creed. What we are really doing is helping America be the great beacon of hope and justice for all the world to marvel. But what we are really doing, Corpus Christi Bar Association, located here in Corpus Christi, Texas, what we are really doing, what we most importantly are doing, is helping America be America for all Americans. And that's why we have to advance the rule of law and make sure that the Constitution is real for all Americans, because all of our children deserve a right to the promise of the American dream and have an equal opportunity at life.
That's right.
And liberty in the pursuit of happiness.
That's right.
God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Wow, that was a